before I start, I want to show my audience. So I have my mom and my brother with me. Okay. So the opioid epidemic is a nationwide problem, but Ohio has been one of the many states that has been hit specifically hard by this issue. And this is cited from an article by Lacey Liddick called Solving the Opioid Epidemic in Ohio, and she said that in 2016, unintentional drug overdose caused the death of 4,050 Ohio residents, which was a 32.8% increase compared to 2015. And the need is a reduction in the amount of opioids being abused in Ohio. And so now I'm going to talk about the difference between prescription opioids and synthetic opioids. And prescription opioids are given by a doctor to reduce the amount of pain that a patient is feeling after a serious injury or a surgery. And these drugs come from a poppy plant. But synthetic opioids are man-made in a lab, and they're easier to access for people who are addicted to opioids, and these could be opioids such as heroin or fentanyl. And this is also cited from the article by Lacey Liddick, and she said that 3 out of the 4 new heroin users reported first abusing prescription opioids before beginning to use heroin. So most people who get addicted to heroin and fentanyl originally were addicted to prescription opioids. And so prescription opioids could be hydrocodone, morphine, oxycodone, and oxymorphine, and many more. And this is cited from an article by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and they said that people who use prescription opioids can feel relaxed and happy, but also experience drowsiness, confusion, nausea, constipation, and slowed breathing. And misusing prescription opioids can lead to the use of heroin and other synthetic opioids. And so now I'm going to talk about heroin, and heroin is a synthetic opioid drug made from morphine, and these facts are also cited from the article by Lacey Liddick, and she said that it can cause symptoms similar to prescription opioids, like I talked about in the last slide, but the symptom that most people get addicted to is that euphoric feeling, and euphoria results because heroin affects the brain the same way prescription drugs do, which is binding to the opioid receptors in order to increase feelings involved with pain and pleasure. And heroin is definitely not prescribed by doctors, and it is found on the black market or on the streets. And now I'm going to talk about fentanyl, and this is cited from the article Exploring Synthetic Heroin by J. Mitchell Miller, and he said that it is 5 to 15 times more potent than heroin, and it can be associated with euphoria, constipation, altered mood, drowsiness, cough suppression, and respiratory depression. And people may seek out fentanyl because it can give them a more intense high than heroin can. And so now for the proposal, and my group intends to reduce the amount of opioids abused in Ohio with these following solutions. So we came up with a total of 8 solutions. We all came together and exchanged solutions, and we made the grid, which I have right here, and it is also going to be in the PowerPoint presentation, but we all got these 8 solutions, and then we came onto a Zoom call together, and we tested these solutions against the criteria to create the grid. And so there were 3 specific solutions that had the least total number that we thought were the best, and these were to consider ways to increase and maximize use of prescription drug monitoring programs, and that scored a 7, which is a perfect score actually. And the second one was to educate patients about proper opioid use and disposal, and that scored an 8, which is only 1 over perfect. And the third one was oxy-free emergency departments that don't prescribe or refill opioids as a first-line response to acute injuries, and that also scored an 8. So I don't really think that there is an opposition to wanting to solve the opioid epidemic, but what I could think of was the people using may not want this to be solved because they don't think that anything is wrong, but if this does get solved, then it would be better for these people's health and for their well-being, and they will realize how bad it is when they stop using and get through that withdrawal process. And so the benefits of these solutions was, for the one that said to maximize the prescription drug monitoring programs, it could reduce the amount of unnecessary opioid prescriptions being given, reducing the amount of people who start to get addicted to them. And when we educate the patients about proper opioid use and disposal, this would give information that they may not have known in order to reduce the amount of overdoses. And with the oxy-free emergency departments, these departments will decrease the amount of people that get addicted to opioids because they will not be given opioids for small injuries, and they're less likely to get addicted. And a fringe benefit that our group came up with was that medical insurance rates will decrease because less people will overdose on opioids, and that will mean less people will need to go to the hospital. And so a summary of this presentation was that we need to reduce the amount of opioids being abused in Ohio by prescription monitoring and to educate these people, and these departments could reduce the amount of people getting addicted to opioids because they won't prescribe opioids for small injuries, and these solutions will reduce the amount of opioid overdoses as a whole in Ohio. And although Ohio is one of the main places that opioid epidemic is at its worst, there are many ways for this problem to be reduced, and I encourage everyone to research about this epidemic and find ways that we can all help reduce the amount of overdoses in our community.